Yes. Oh, hey, Akim. Look, Miss Akim is on time, and she said that she's like, I'm on time. This is so good. Hello, everyone. Oh my God, I'm so happy. Welcome to day three of our Elite Women's Tax and Business Strategies Summit. Okay, we're wrapping it up today, and isn't it just amazing that we're ending it with non-profits, right? Like it couldn't be better. We've talked taxes, we've talked to those that are on the career path, we've talked to business owners, and today we're going to be talking about nonprofits. Those that are thinking about going into nonprofits are already in nonprofits. And our title for today is From Passion to Purpose. Guys, I'm Dr. Lily Binglow. Super honored to be in front of you, sharing the little I know so I can add to what you're doing. And hopefully, you don't only make informed decisions, but you build successful and sustainable organizations. If we've never met, I am an entrepreneur. I am the founder of the ARC NPS, a full service accounting firm where we provide accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, tax services, startup services as well for businesses, nonprofits, and individuals. I am an author. I am a speaker. Of all the things I love to do, teaching is at the core of it. Thank you for hanging on throughout these 3 days. And again, we're wrapping up today. And I think we picked the right topic because from here, if there's someone who's had a burning desire to do much more and give back to their community, I believe that you will gain so much clarity from this point on. Okay. So just a little recap on day one of our summit, and this summit, first of all, was dedicated to the International Women's Day that we were celebrating. And as women, we've come such a long way, right? Just the things that we're able to do now that some of our mothers, our aunties, our grandparents were not able to do because they didn't have the rights and things like that. But we have come so far. We've made so much progress. And now we're not scared to take up space. We're not scared to make an impact or make a difference in any space that you put us in. And so as we did this summit, we decided to do something that will give back to the women that are already making a difference and just to add a little bit more fuel to what they're building. So day one was committed to women who are on a career path, working as employees. And the idea was really understanding what your paycheck, what's in your paycheck, right? So that way you can take advantage of the available tax strategies and credits that are there for you, and you can maximize your take home, because it's very important understanding what you're making as your gross and what you're going to take home as your net. There's so much that goes in between, and we're able to break that down. In addition to that, we talked about how to negotiate for a pay increase, right? Because a lot of us ladies, sometimes we work so hard, we undersell ourselves, and we don't even go after the additional income that we know we truly deserve. So we did talk about that. Day two yesterday was focusing on building sustainable businesses, expanding, bringing in more revenue, and staying profitable without losing our minds. And this was for business owners. And so I think if you've known, my heart is always in the business world, and it's because I know building is hard. Building is so hard, and I'm hoping that I can continue to support those that are building with what I know, so that they do an effective job and gain so much joy in what they're doing. And lastly, the one that brings me the most fulfillment is nonprofits. And today we're talking about going from passion to purpose. Okay. And this is about not just starting a nonprofit, but able to build one that is going to be sustainable, by having all the right tools in place and seeking the kind of funding that will help you to sustain the organization. That's very important, you guys. Okay. So what is a nonprofit organization? For someone who is just joining me, if you don't know what a nonprofit is, or if you've been thinking about it, right? This is you have the heart to do something good. You want to give back to the community, and you just, but you're on the fence, right? So a nonprofit is an organization that is set up to fulfill a mission. So a nonprofit, as the name goes, nonprofit just means it's not being set up to make money for anyone to directly benefit from the proceeds. It's set up for a mission. It's set up to provide some kind of service, to serve a community, to to impact the lives of a group of people and make them better. All right. So when you're setting up a nonprofit organization, you have to keep in mind, I'm not going in this to make money. That does not mean a nonprofit cannot make money or have a profit. It just means the goal is not money, or the goal is not a profit, especially if someone is going to be benefiting out of it directly. Okay. So I talk to a lot of women. I talk to women all the time. And one thing that is, I see a recurring theme amongst most of us is, if we've been through a rough patch in our lives, if we've gone through a hard season, or if we've experienced certain challenges, we always want to help the next person not to go through that, right? If you think of someone who maybe has gone through a divorce, for example, you see that person constantly thinking of ways she can mentor the young people not to have to deal with that. You might meet a woman who has had to deal with aging parents, right? And just maybe how it affected her mentally. And she starts to think, how can I help other people to deal with the mental challenges that come with taking care of maybe a sick patient or a parent or going through certain challenges? The whole idea is, many women I know are always thinking of ways to give back. Okay. And so when you start thinking of ways to give back, our first thought process is a nonprofit. Now, before I go into talk about how you can start up and build a successful nonprofit, I need us to make sure that the nonprofit is actually right for you. Many of us wake up and you've heard it so many times. I want to start a nonprofit. Somebody rushes online to register, or they go to someone who barely knows what they are doing and they just register. But before setting up any nonprofit, I always want the founder, to clarify if this is actually what is good for them. Okay. Because having a good heart, having the desire to serve, having the heart to give back does not mean you have to necessarily operate in a nonprofit, because nonprofits have their own restrictions. Okay. So let's talk about some of the questions I always ask founders, right? Because when you're starting up a nonprofit, you're called a founder. So the first thing is, what is really the mission and the vision of your organization? Is it completely just to give back, or is it something that you want to have, you want to build for you and maybe pass on to your kids? Very important, because if you're building something where it's not, you don't think of it operating without you, that can be a problem. So that mission and that vision should really, what they call the smell test. If it smells like this, is really it. It means you really want to do something to give back. You're not fronting. You're not pretending. You're not using some excuse to find ways to get money that is tax free. You actually want to do something good for the community. Okay. So the first thing is, what is that mission and what is that vision? Is it really something that is burning, that even if you had no money, if nothing was happening, you would still want to do to improve the lives of others? That's the first thing. The second thing is, are you able to give up control? And that is so important, because what happens to a lot of founders is, when they start a nonprofit, they start to call it my organization. I hate to break it down to you. Nobody owns a nonprofit. You're just a founder. That's why a nonprofit, when it's set up, it has a board of directors to help it make decisions. It can go into debt. It has a mind of its own, driven, of course, by the decisions of the board. And you, as a founder, if you stop pursuing the mission of the organization, the board can vote you off. I know, surprise, right? So it's very important to ask yourself, if something were to go wrong, am I okay giving control away of the nonprofit? Because most founders never, sometimes they'll ask me, what if I put it in the bylaws that nobody can vote me off? Unfortunately, nobody can prevent that, right? Nobody can stop you from being voted off. If you start to go against the mission of the organization, they can actually get you off the board. The third thing I want you to ask yourself is, how do I plan to fund this nonprofit? Do I seek investors, partners, and will I want to make sure that they get a return on their investment? Now, if that's the case, a nonprofit might not be for you. And the reason is because nonprofits are not set up for anyone to benefit from their proceeds. Nonprofits are generally set up to serve a mission. And that's important. We're going to talk about how they get funded down the road as we go. But it's something to think about. And then you, as the owner, if you think, the founder, if you think, I'm going to put my money in this and I'm going to take home a profit, unfortunately, you cannot do that. That's why when people are starting nonprofits, I always tell them, keep in mind, this is either going to be a donation or treat it as a loan. Have a conversation with the board and let the board admit that all this money you're putting in is a loan that you will be paid back. Because remember, the organization is separate from you. So I need you to clarify that, because sometimes we get into nonprofits not realizing that it's not for us. We really wanted to do business. We just had a good heart. And now we're stuck because you can't take the proceeds out of the organization. It's not your personal money. It's set for a good. Even though you might have used your money to start it, that was a donation. Okay, so that's very important to clarify. And then the last one, which I think is always key, is do you plan to seek other ways to make money through this organization? And I say so because if you were in the session yesterday, I talked about diversifying your income, your revenue sources, right? If you're in a nonprofit, let's say you were getting a building and you said, for this building, I want to be able to train maybe kids, young athletes, manners or something, okay? That's your mission. You might be granted a nonprofit status, but in that space, you also want to use it as a wedding venue. Unfortunately, as a nonprofit, you can't just do that. First, the board has to agree. Second, it's unrelated business income and you have to pay taxes on it. So, guys, I start with this because I want every woman who is thinking about starting a nonprofit, or maybe you already are in a nonprofit, and I'm saying these things and it's resonating with you because you might have thought I can just spend money from the nonprofit. You can't. It's not your business. It's not owned by you. You only founded it and you were given that opportunity to run it because you said you wanted to pursue a mission that was going to improve the lives of others. Now, once you have gone through all this and you're like, okay, I'm comfortable giving up control. I can step away. I'm very aware that I'm not going to take the proceeds out of it. It doesn't mean you will not be fairly compensated for your work. Don't get me wrong. If you do work for the nonprofit, you can and will be compensated for your work if, whatever the board agrees. But you cannot say, I'm going to take home the profit. You just cannot do that. Okay, very important. And also know that you just can't bring in investors and expect to pay them back. Whatever they put in is treated as donations. So they don't get any any return on investment unless it was a loan that they made to the nonprofit and they'll be paid back the amount that the loan to the nonprofit. Okay, so now let's get on. I wanted to make sure that we cleared that. So when you're ready now to set up a nonprofit, what do you do? Because there's someone here who is thinking about it and they might go to a person who has no clarity on what to do. I'm going to go through this real quick. If you're taking notes, please remember these things I'm telling you, because every day I'm dealing with, not every day, but at least pretty often, at least twice a month, we're dealing with people who have gone through someone who didn't set up their nonprofit right. And then they ended up, needing to dissolve it or having to redo the process. So let me take you through this. I want to make sure that I get this in like 4 minutes. Okay. So when you're ready to start a nonprofit, the first thing I want you to do, make sure you clarify your mission and your vision. Okay. This is something that is burning in your heart. What do you want to do? What's that long-term goal? What is it that you want to see as the impact that your nonprofit is going to make now and, of course, long-term? Once you have done that, hear me out. Create a business plan. I know it's a nonprofit, but that does not mean you're going to just run it like something that is that you don't care about. You're going to run it you're going to run it like a business. Granted, its purpose is not to make a profit. It doesn't mean it will not make a profit. It should not make a profit. It should, because you need to continue funding your activities and your programs. So you want to have a business plan that clarifies what you're doing, who you're doing it to, who you're serving to. That's going to cover where you think you're going to be funding getting your funding from. Have a plan on how you're going to make sure that people know who you are. You want to do this. Once you've written that very detailed business plan, the third thing I want you to do is get yourself a board of directors. I'm going to say one thing. You don't necessarily need to have a board of directors that will be there with you forever. We call these ones a founding board. A founding board is like you. They are helping you start the organization, but they don't need to stay, because when we get to the part of growing your nonprofit, you need people that have certain skill sets, okay? At the very start of your nonprofit, it's very hard to find the right people because you don't yet exist. They don't know you. They don't really know what you're about. There's no results to help you attract the right kind of quality. And most importantly, board members don't get paid and the not-profits because they have to stay objective. They can be reimbursed for certain expenses, but they don't get paid for serving on the board because the IRS needs them to stay objective. So you can start with your first few board members. We'll call them your founding board members because you need them to be able to set up your organization. Once you've done that, the fourth thing I want you to do is to go to the state website and register your organization. Now, when you register at the state, you're either going to incorporate, so you're going to incorporate as a non-stock corporation, or you're going to set up yourself as a trust. Now, for the trust, is usually if you have like a lot of assets and then you need you'll have a trustee managing it. But the average nonprofit will incorporate will set up as a corporation. Why? Because corporations are separate from you, the founder, okay? And corporations provide protection. In case something were to happen, nobody can personally come for you or the board of directors unless you were personally liable for something that went wrong, okay? So once you get set up at the state level, because you also need a jurisdiction to operate in, right? Once you get set up at the state level, move from there, go get yourself your EIN letter, and then you apply for your tax exempt status. Now, very important, keep this in mind. When you register at the state level, you have just set up a legal entity. If you attended one of my sessions last week, I explained what a legal entity is. A legal entity is is set up. It's a body, right? A legal entity is a body or a structure that can operate, make decisions, take a loan, own assets, buy assets, sell assets, and things like that. So you as an individual, you are a legal entity. And then you get to set up your nonprofit as a legal entity when you incorporate it. But that does not mean your legal entity will not pay taxes, because if your legal entity is making money, it will pay taxes. Who is in charge of taxes in the US is the IRS. So now you go to the IRS to grant you the tax exempt status. You see what I'm saying? It's important to understand the steps, because sometimes someone might register you at the state, but they did not tell you that you're set up as a corporation. So any money that comes in per the IRS, you're supposed to pay 21% of taxes on it because you're a corporation. So you do apply to the IRS to make you tax exempt. So that way you don't pay taxes, that 21% corporate tax rate on the money that comes into your organization. I hope someone's going to remember this, okay? So remember, the tax exempt status is granted by the IRS based on what your mission will be. There are different types of tax exempt status. There's 501c3 is the popular one you all know. This is where your organization is being funded either by the public or government grants, but then you also have like 501c4, 501c5, 6, 7, and the list goes on, okay? In addition to that, when you go to the IRS now, depending on where you are as a person, okay, you can choose to be a public charity or you can choose to be a private foundation. You will still do the same application. You're just going to indicate on there. So for private foundations, this is for those money makers. And in fact, I'm just declaring here that anyone who is watching this, one day you own a private foundation. Private foundation is generally funded by you and other people, but you have more control over the money. And private foundations give money to public charities to do work. Public charities, on the other hand, they take money from the public, from the government, through grants, through and from private foundations to serve a purpose. You see what I'm saying? So the difference now is there's one person who is hands on the ground, they're doing good. There's another person who may not be able to be hands on the ground but has money, and they can fund the other, and they can fund the person hands on the ground. Okay, remember this stuff, guys. This is not things you're gonna hear on the streets, all right, unless you're right here listening to Dr. Binglow. Okay, so once you have your tax exempt status, please come back to the state. That doesn't end there, because the IRS has given you an exempt status doesn't mean you're completely exempt. You have to come back to the state level and apply for state exemptions depending on your state. You have to make sure you get the necessary, if you have to get a business license, you get that. You have to apply for something called charitable solicitation, where you get the state to give you permission to actually raise funding. Okay, and then every year you make sure you file your taxes. For someone who is starting out, these are some of those steps I want you to keep in mind. Hold board meetings, document. This is that beginning stages. Now, once you're set up, the most important one now is growing your organizations and making sure that it is sustainable. There are some things here that are so crucial, okay? When it comes now to growing your organization, this is where you've taken your passion and you're like, look, nonprofit is the way. You've set up the nonprofit, you're ready to run, you're doing your best. But there are some things that must be in place if your organization is going to grow and if it's going to sustain itself. Okay. Couple of things. The first thing is you need to actually be making the impact and doing what you said you're going to do. Because sometimes there are people who have a heart. They want to do something good, but they don't have the time. And so you end up telling people, I'm going to do this, but you end up not doing it. A lot of times people fail. That's not fair. So you want to make sure that you're actually doing what you said you're going to do. That's the first thing when we think of growth and sustainability. Second thing, you want to make sure that you're known by the right people. You know, sometimes people will crack jokes like, oh, I don't like when people give and they come and post it on social media. Well, if the Bible was not written, we'll never know the things that Jesus did. We didn't know, we would not have known he fed 5,000 people. So you have to make sure that you're putting yourself in front of the people that need to know what you're doing, right? The third, because those are your potential donors. The third thing is you need to have a solid board. let me tell you guys, the board that you started with, that I called your founding board members, by this time, you have to start thinking of getting a solid board. This is what we call your governing board or your operational board. This is the board now that comes in with different skill sets. This is where you're looking for a board member that knows how to write grants. You're looking for a board member that knows how to do fundraising, someone who's a lawyer, someone who's an accountant. You're looking now for people with exceptional skill sets, okay? The next thing you will need is really good team of volunteers. And this is usually based on the impact you're making, because when people see that you're doing what you said you would do, they want to be a part of it. The next one is for you to have a really good internal process, because if your internal processes are not good, you're going to struggle. And then, of course, the biggest is your funding. Okay. The biggest one is funding. Now, the other ones I just mentioned, most of them are highly dependent on the impact that you're doing. Because if you're doing good work, right, and you're putting yourself out there, the right people will find you. If you're doing good work, if you're making a difference in the lives of people, there are people that will be happy to volunteer to serve on your board. If you're doing exceptional work, volunteers will want to be a part of this. Again, if you're doing the work, you have the right people on your board, you'll likely be able to put good processes in place. But you see, funding is crucial, because funding is not just about you making an impact, but it's also you putting strategies in place to seek out the right funding and ensure that you have the resources to keep your organization going. So now let's talk about it. How do nonprofits get funded? Remember, I just told you guys, nonprofits are set up to pursue a mission, okay? Then the IRS grants you the opportunity to be able to get money from the public, money from people that want to support your mission, and you don't have to pay taxes on that money because you set out to do good. Okay. So now, with that in mind, how do nonprofits get funded? Well, first is nonprofits do get funded by donations, right? Donations from private and public, from individuals or from the public. When you reach out to people on social media, those are all different donations that come to the nonprofit. The second type of way that nonprofits get funded is they get funded through grants. Many nonprofits that have been in existence for a while and have really good grant writers, they sustain themselves on grants. Now, for someone who is new, especially because I want you to be able to build something that will outlast you, it might be tough to rely on grant funding, because guess what? There's limited resources. There are a lot of you guys that are running after the same grants. So for you to be able to position yourself to get it and even succeed to get it is not a joke. So yes, think of grants, go after grants, but you also want to make sure that we're looking at alternative ways of funding your nonprofit. Okay. The next other way you can fund your nonprofit is in-kind donations. There are people that may not necessarily have money to give you, but they can give you a lot of assets. People can give you things like, tables, electronics. And some of these in-kind donations, I've seen what is done for some nonprofits. It's amazing. I mean, there are nonprofits that get in-kind donations worth over $100,000, and you could sell some of these things and use the money even to fund some of your activities. Okay, that's the next one. And then now, okay, we already talked about grants. The next one we're going to talk about is through corporate giving. If you partner with different corporations, they can put different programs in place to be able to help you get like proceeds from their sales or their profits and things like that. Really good way to get funded. Another way to get funded is through partnerships. You can partner with local businesses. If you publicize them, you put their name out there in the world and out there in the streets, and people can go buy knowing that when they buy, certain amount can come to you, and vice versa. There are different ways that some of these partnerships work. Now, the one I want to focus on, because a lot of these other ones are dependent on external sources, the one I want you to focus on is you funding your organization internally. And this is from the sale of goods or services. Being a nonprofit does not mean you cannot sell goods or services, especially if it's in line with your mission. Okay. So let's say you went into nonprofits because you wanted to provide mentorship to maybe young girls that want to go into a certain school. Yes, like law school, right? I know of a lady, she provides mentoring for people that want to go to Harvard Law School. Okay, let's say that's what you're doing. You set up a nonprofit. You could be doing it for free, or you could decide to charge a fee, which is not exorbitant, but it's still in line with your mission. So you charge a lower fee, but you're still pursuing your mission of mentoring young women that want to go to Harvard Law School, because you're probably a graduate from there, right? So maybe you're volunteering your time and you're not charging like high end fees like other people are charging, but you have a sustainable system that will allow you to keep funding your organization. Okay. Sometimes you could actually have resources that you sell, that you create and sell. So you can decide to create books on how to get into Harvard Law School, and you sell that. That is still in line with your mission. Okay, because it's in line with your mission, you can continue to bring in resources, and that way you sustain your organization. That's usually where most nonprofits struggle, because they don't take the time to strategically plan how to bring in resources. So I want you to think in-house. What are the things we can do in-house? So now we talked about, if let's say you got a space, right? So if you get a space and you're using the space for, let's say your nonprofit is to teach dance to kids from low income homes that want to go into certain dance schools, right? You can still rent your space out to other dance tutors. Okay. Now, sometimes if it's too off your mission, you have to pay what we call unrelated business income tax. But if it's still kind of in line with your mission, where you're doing partnerships with other organizations, they're bringing their students to train, and even now you can take your students to come and learn from their students. There you are, still with your mission, and you don't have to pay taxes on the revenues. But guys, there's nothing wrong in having unrelated business income. Now, let me explain. You have a place, you're training young kids how to dance, but there's a daycare that says, look, since your dance classes are in the evening, can we rent out your space to run our daycare during the day? It's not in line with your mission. So that is what we call unrelated business income. But guess what? Even if you're paying taxes on it, it's still going to bring a significant amount of revenue to help you fund your nonprofit. Okay. So, guys, as we're building, it's important to start thinking of different ways to fund your nonprofit that is not dependent on grants and is not only dependent on donations. Now, are donations great? Yes. Are there ways to even make it possible to get more donations, like automation, managing those donor relationships, even making monthly small donations? Yes. But I want you to start to think outside of the box. Okay. That's very, very important. If you think outside of the box in these different ways to fund your nonprofit, you're going to build a very sustainable organization. And in addition, you can also invest. You can invest some of the proceeds that you're getting to ensure sustainability for a long time. All right. So now that we've talked about the different ways you can fund your nonprofit, what are some essential things you need to have in place in order for your nonprofit to keep to continue to attract funding? All right, because I want you to diversify. I want you to leverage all these sources. I'm not saying pick one over another. I'm just saying diversify how you're bringing in resources into your nonprofit. Okay, so what do you need to have in place to ensure that you continuously bring in resources, or to position yourself to attract resources? Okay, well, the first one is you do want to have a very compelling vision and mission, because people would only align themselves with something that they believe in, something that they see that it's very compelling and is indeed making a difference in the lives of people. And not only are you making sure you have that compelling vision and statement, but you're also capturing your results and being very loud about it. Okay, that's the first thing. The first thing. Second thing is you need to always have accurate records. I emphasize this everywhere I go, anytime I talk. I don't care what anybody tells you, whether you're in the business world or nonprofit, your most important element for success is accurate records. Accurate records, accurate records, accurate records. Then in the nonprofit world, even more, because you're dealing with money that is given to you from other people. And so transparency and having those accurate records is key to your long-term success. Okay, so making sure that you're tracking everything that is coming in, where it's coming from, and where the money is going to, extremely crucial. Okay, then now the third thing for you, after the first thing was of course the compelling vision and making sure that you're tracking your results and being loud about it. Then the next thing, of course, is making sure that you have the right support, the accurate financial statement. The third thing is your board. Continue to add the right people in your board. Having a solid board is a good way for people to trust you with grants. When people want to give you grants, they want to see who is going to be helping you to manage those grants. Even donors, when people want to give donations, who are the people on your board? If they see, okay, there's a lawyer, there is there is a CPA, there's this person who can manage this. It causes them now to be excited to give to you. So having a solid board that have the right skill set will also help you to attract funding. Okay. The next thing I want you to do is make sure that you're being compliant by filing your taxes. Guys, if you're hearing me for the first time, your tax is an incredible fundraising tool. Of all the documents nonprofits have, taxes is usually a public record, which means if someone wanted to give to you, one of the things that they will do is pull your taxes. So you can leverage your tax return as a powerful storytelling tool. Why? Because your tax return allows you to be able to list out your accomplishments, to be able to list out the programs that you've done, and most importantly, the money that came in and how the money was spent. So if you as a nonprofit, you're not filing the right kind of tax return that can help you to position yourself for potential donors to see, it's going to be a loss for you. Now, I will say this: if you had any money coming to your nonprofit and you had activities, stay away from 990N. The 990N is a compliance tax return. It tells nothing except just keeps you compliant. Okay. The IRS requires you to file every year, whether you had no activities, because that's the only way that they can trust you to that you're actually still keeping up with the exempt status, which is a privilege. But once you start to operate, whether you're making money or you're not making money, if you are actively pursuing things, like maybe you're still using your money, but you're pursuing your programs, you're making a difference in the lives of others, please, by all means, file the 990EZ, because the 990EZ will allow you to say what you've been able to do and the results you've been able to accomplish. And then, of course, as you make more money, you want to file the full 990. Very important for you to stay compliant. Oh my God. Hey, Desmond. Hey, Bernadette. Thank you guys for joining. So the next thing now, once you're compliant, you're filing your taxes and leveraging your taxes as a funding tool, I want you now to work on your budget. Never wing it when it comes to your budget. Your budget is such a powerful tool because it's what captures your future plans and how you plan to accomplish them. Okay. So your budget is saying, this is the impact we want to make. This is how much we need to be able to make that impact. So when somebody comes up to you and say, okay, what do you guys plan to do next year and how much do you need? You don't want to start going and biting your finger. No, you want to always have a budget in place. What should your budget entail? It should entail how you plan to fund your nonprofit. So your different sources that you think you'll be seeking, from donations to grants to internal service and goods sales and things like that. Now, most of us don't have a lot of control over what is going to come because you're dependent on donations, you're dependent on grants. You can't really guarantee. But one thing that is so important is having your expenses put as functional expenses. So every budget you're creating, let it have three things. Let it have what you're going to spend for the programs that are aligned with your mission. Okay. So I'm going to pick on Ben, who is training young kids on how to march. She's doing an incredible job. And guys, I'm going to come back to her because we do need to support her organization, her business, and what she's doing through the kids. But let's say Ben had set up a nonprofit to be able to train these kids. Okay. Now, what will be happening in Ben's case is she's going to say, okay, in order to train 15 or 50 kids, this is what the program cost will be. Okay. The next thing she's going to have is administrative costs, because in order for her to train the kids, she's going to need someone who is maintaining paperwork. She's going to need someone that is running errands, answering calls. So you need to have your administrative expenses also. And then the third expense is fundraising, because with every nonprofit, you need to find ways to raise money. And so even if it means going to different events, hosting events, those expenses have to be laid out. They call them functional expenses. So always have your program expenses, administrative expenses, and your fundraising expenses. Okay. So for anyone who is thinking about funding, these are those important elements that I want you to have. All right. And then, of course, be loud about what you're doing. Be loud. Leverage social media. I have people that are founders of nonprofits and I have no idea that's what they're doing. And then one day they're going to come into my inbox and send me a message and say, we're looking for money, but I don't know you. I don't know what you're doing. That's the same thing with your potential donors. They don't know you. So be loud. Make a lot of noise. Let people always know what you're doing and how you're impacting different lives. Otherwise, this passion of yours that has become purpose, it will become a burden on you. And we don't want that. All right. And so one last thing I have for you that I think you should make sure that you're prioritizing is taking care of yourself, making sure you're getting yourself a fair share. I mean, you're paying yourself a fair salary and making sure you're also paying your team members right and taking care of your volunteers. This is where that people element comes in very importantly. Make sure that your salary is a fair salary and you're getting compensated, because you don't want to get burned out. you want to also make sure that you're getting paid for your time. That should be in the budget as well. And you also want to make sure that your staff is being paid fairly. Back in the days, they used to complain that nonprofits had very high administrative costs. So guess what? People ran away from the nonprofit world. But that has changed, because for nonprofits to operate effectively and efficiently, they also need people that have the educational background and the experience. And for you to have people like that, you have to be able to compensate them fairly for their time. Okay. I said it was the last one. No, it wasn't. The last one now, in order to make sure that your passion is actually accomplishing purpose for your life, delegate. Don't do it by yourself. Remember, you don't own this nonprofit. You're a founder and you're setting it up to do good that will make a difference in the lives of many people. Don't feel like you need to do it and be a hero so you can tell people that I am the founder of this nonprofit and we've done. No, 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 no. Bring others in, delegate, make sure that is a team effort, so that way you're not burned out, you're doing good, you're living a fulfilled life, and you're even making money out of it by paying yourself to for the work that you're doing. Okay, so thank you guys for hanging out. I'm gonna go in and check the questions. I just want to be sure I didn't miss anything, which I think I did not. Sometimes I go so quickly because I live and breathe these things every day, so sometimes I'm like, okay, make sure you didn't miss anything that you wanted to share. But those are the things that I want any sister, any friend of mine who is watching this, if you have the heart to serve, if you have the heart to do good, first thing, just as we did from the beginning, make sure that a nonprofit is right for you. Because having a heart to serve and wanting to make a difference does not mean that you should work as a nonprofit, because you can still have a business and you can still do good. You don't necessarily nonprofit. So when you go through all the questions that I provided, the questions that I said you should ask yourself, if a nonprofit is really for you, make sure that you do the right setup. Make sure that you go through the right people to get yourself set up. Okay, don't wing it. This is very important. So you can get your state registration done right. You can get your exempt status done right as well. Okay. Then the next thing I want you to do is understand how nonprofits get funded, the different ways you can fund your nonprofit, but most importantly, focus on diversifying internally, because you have more control on what you're doing internally than on donors, because you can't guarantee that people will give you money. You can't guarantee that you're going to win grants, but that is cool. And you also want to make sure that you have things in place, like having a solid board, keeping accurate records, making sure that you have a budget you can show to people, making sure that you're also being compensated for your time so that this does not become a burden, taking care of your team, taking care of your volunteers, and delegating as you go. All right. If you need any help, remember, if you have questions, you can always hop on my calendar. We have the complimentary 15-minute meeting. You don't have to be a client to come and pick on my brain. Okay. I'm more than happy to provide guidance. We do set up nonprofit organizations at the ARC, because we want to be your one-stop shop. But if you're already a nonprofit and you feel like you don't know if this is for you, you want to have a conversation, I'm also happy to. If you haven't started yet and you want us to go through the process and register you, we provide a full year of support. So we register at the state, we get your exempt status, we provide board training, because your board is the decision-making body. We provide training for your board, we provide planning, we file your taxes as well, making sure that you leverage this tax return, as I said, as a funding tool, as is a document that donors and grantors depend on to make decisions. Okay, so yes, let's see. Any questions so far? Can one still get funding without being registered to the government, even after being registered to a main enterprise? That is interesting. So this is what I would say, right? It depends on who you're seeking funding from. Okay. The reason why, let's say here in the US, the reason why people go through to become tax exempt, for the IRS to grant them the tax exempt status, is because when people donate to your organization, people don't pay taxes on the money. They get a break from the money. And then you yourself, you don't pay tax on the money that you receive. Okay. Now, if you're seeking funding from people that are passionate about what you're doing, even if you're not a nonprofit, people will still support. I see people raising money to do good all the time. Now, some people will give because they don't really care about, getting the tax benefit of it. But some people may not give to you because without you being a registered entity, you might not have the level of transparency and accountability that is expected of organizations that are registered. Because when you register as a nonprofit, you remember I just mentioned transparency is a big deal. And when people want to give, they want to know that the money that you have been getting before, you have actually been using the money to do what you said you would do, right? If anything would discourage you from giving to a nonprofit is when they don't use money as they promised to do, to use it, right? People don't know. We've seen it all the time. People have donated money, giving it to someone, and before you know it, this person is buying new shoes and new clothes and buying a new car. I'm not saying that they should not do it. I'm just saying that if you came and ask money to do something good and then we see you doing something else, it gets questionable. And then it causes people to not want to give. But when you're registered at the state level, at the federal level, it helps people to trust you more because they can pull up your records, they can see that you're active, they can see that you're reporting through your taxes how you're using the money, and they can trust to give. So when it comes now to your question again, it depends on who you're seeking funding from. There are people I know that I know their hearts. Even if they were not a nonprofit, they said they wanted to do a project, I will give to them. I don't need the tax benefit. It's because I know their hearts, because they will use their own money to do good. But if someone came to me and just said, we're looking for funding, I don't know you, I have not seen, you're not registered anywhere where I can verify, there's no record of you doing good or making a difference in the lives of people, that might make me hesitant to give. Okay. Most grants, generally, if you're applying for a grant, if you're not a nonprofit, an active nonprofit, you won't even get it. That will be out of question because they're going to verify your status to make sure that you're active. And guys, for I talked about taxes. Anyone listening to me, if you have a nonprofit in the US, even if you have no activities, please file your taxes. There's this tax return called 990N. It's just compliance. The moment you don't file your taxes, the IRS will automatically revoke your exemption after 3 years. And now, guess what could happen to you in that third year? And I'm saying it because I know people it happened to. You might get someone who wants to give you a donation, and then the person goes and pulls your record, and they realize that your status, your exempt status, has been revoked. Sometimes you can set up a nonprofit, but then you have life happening to you, and you're not able to really pursue it at that moment. Keep filing the tax return to keep it active. Nonprofits do not pay tax on money that comes from grants, donations, or anything, but still file to stay compliant. Okay. All right. Hi, Anthea Tita. Thank you so much for joining. I want to make sure that I didn't miss any other questions. Do you have nonprofit setup questions? Okay, yes. So yes, any more questions? I think we got that in. I hope this was helpful, you guys. This was the last day of our 3 days Elite Women's Tax and Business Strategies Summit. I hope it was very impactful for those that have been watching. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share what I know with you guys, and I hope that whatever you're building, whatever you're working on, that the little that I have shared with you is going to add impact to what you're building and make a difference. Okay, even not you, maybe you can share with someone. So remember, if you want to have a conversation, if you have questions that are particular to your situation but you don't have someone to ask, feel free to hop on my calendar. I have a complimentary meeting. If you actually want a full planning meeting, you can also do that. I have a full hour meeting for that. I do provide board member trainings, and it's always amazing because when people get on the board of a nonprofit, they have no idea what comes with being on a board. So make sure that if you have a board and you have not really given them any training, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to schedule something and provide some training for them. All right. For those who have not yet gotten my business owners planner, I don't know what you're waiting for. Make sure you get on Amazon and get it. Even if it's not for you, you can give it as a gift to someone else. It's an incredible tool for business owners. It has everything from tax strategies, business tips, ways to track your business, track your numbers. It's an amazing tool. I do it every year, and it just keeps getting better and better. So feel free to buy it as a gift for a friend. They're going to really, really appreciate it. Okay. Thank you all so much. We've come to the end of our summit. I can't wait for our next one. I was about to spill the name, but I have to wait because the team has to confirm that with me. But I appreciate you. Desmond, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you so much. Thank you all, everyone who was on. Ben, Miss Akim, Anthea, thank you. I may not see other people because I'm on the back end of a streaming yard, but I appreciate you all so, so much. Have a lovely evening and have an amazing week, beginning of week and an entire week. Go and do great things. Again, happy International Women's Day to all the amazing women making a difference in the lives of the people around them and every organization that they found themselves in. All right. Bye, you guys. Be safe. Stay out of trouble. Bye.